So welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Patterns and Practices General SharePoint Development Special Interest Group. So the SIG means Special Interest Group. And this is the bi-weekly sync. We do have few different of these special interest groups which are meeting bi-weekly. So every single Thursday at the same time, we actually have a SharePoint community call. And every bi-weekly it's around SharePoint framework and PnP JS and client-side development. And then bi-weekly it's around the SharePoint General Dev. And what does that actually mean? Well, this is actually originally meant to be an kind of a office hours for SharePoint PnP, but then we started having so many things to actually talk about, or so many new things getting ready. Then we started having SharePoint framework and all of that. So this has been more and more evolving to be the special interest group around end-to-end solution designs, provisioning, automation, PowerShell, kind of non-JavaScript development topics. Even though obviously today we'll touch some of the client-side development topics as well as part of the Chris Kent's presentation. But this is really around more on, if we want to go through and deep dive on the hub sides, this would be the special interest group for that one. And then the other one is more for SharePoint framework and client-side development. Now, AKMS SP PnP community, tech community, you'll find stuff from there. AKMS SP DevDocs, that's the official documentation and location. But this is really around end-to-end solution, and more in the future, probably our direction with this special interest group is to take one topic and then, let's say, go that through from a development perspective. We've done that for hub sites in the past. Now today we're going to talk about the column formatters and what does it actually mean from a development perspective and an end user perspective. And then in the future we'll talk about other topics as well, kind of a more deep dive on a specific area, rather than having a 10-minute demo on something which you don't necessarily are sure what are we actually going through. Now, so opportunities to participate with the community. So this is mainly for reaching out or seeing if there's any other people who wants to actually do live demos, MVPs or non-MVPs on this course. And there are different opportunities for you to join the SharePoint Dev community. So you can absolutely demo a solution or a technical pattern in this course. So reach out to us and say, hey, I would like to have a 10-15 minute spot to go through some cool stuff. And it doesn't necessarily have to be super cool. The whole point is actually covering different patterns and different solutions, and then we can even talk about those solutions in this course. So we'll learn from each other, and that's really, really important. You can absolutely contribute in a GitHub by doing pull requests and modifications on the stuff that we were having across the SharePoint GitHub organization, which is really, really popular. The numbers are actually surprisingly increasing. The visitor numbers in GitHub are increasing quite fast. And then you can provide feedback. And with feedback, we mean social media, we mean issue list, we need whatever channels to giving us feedback around the SharePoint development. If something isn't right, please let us know. We will try to fix that. How fast we can fix that, that's debatable. But we try. The key point is that we in SharePoint engineering would know about the things which are blocking your, let's say, work or you to be successful in the SharePoint side. So we can at least put it in our backlog, and that's really, really important. Now, today, before we go there, actually, there's a good question from Raymond, because this is a pretty important thing. So there is a customizer event issue related on SharePoint framework on the modern pages, and that is getting fixed, and it should be actually already getting fixed pretty soon. So the estimate is now within a matter of days. There was a miss around the importance of that particular issue, unfortunately, in our internal process, but people are now understanding the impact of that one. And now that you asked for that, I will absolutely follow up on the status of that one. Good. Yes, Philip, good comment. Now, today's topic, I actually have quite a few slides on going through general announcements and updates on SharePoint development. So we have quite a lot of new stuff actually which has gone live since the 2 weeks or 1 week ago when we had a previous special or community call. And then we'll cover the column formatting, and that's done by Chris Kent. Chris is some sort of a SharePoint lead from a DMI. He will do his intros in a second, but he's an MVP as well, and he has built really, really cool stuff for the column formatting. So I'll let Chris to really demonstrate that one. Now, before we go there and before we go to the actual column formatting topic, a few things and few areas which I wanted to go through. So obviously, the one thing which I promise to keep in all of these slides is the documentation and guidance. So please, 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 if you're looking into latest documentation on SharePoint documentation, go AKMS SPDev Docs or docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint. You'll find the SharePoint documentation from here. This is evolving on daily basis, and there's new stuff and new content getting there all the time. You will see a lot of changes in here in the future. Kind of I don't know if it's a sad thing, but as an example, all of our schema documentation from ONET XMLs and feature XMLs and everything else will be moved in here as well, because that's still also valid. Now, for the past month, we had 830,000 views on the things. Now, other topics which has happened, and this was announced last week in the Twitter and in Facebook. So if you're interested on accessing the SharePoint documentation and you don't have, and you're not online all the time, so you need to have something, take it offline with you, you can always download a version in the PDF. So this is always up to date on the documentation, what's available in the docs.microsoft.com as we speak. Now, so that's kind of a call for those who are not online. Some people might be wondering, well, why would you have a PDF download version? But it's a global world, and there's quite a lot of people who are working with a not that fast internet connectivity, and that option is great for that. Now, running into issues, and just a reminder on that one, please let us know. So AKMS SPDev issues, that's the issue list in the docs.microsoft.com, which we also use for comments in the docs.microsoft.com. But you can come here, submit an issue, let us know if something isn't working properly. And then you can absolutely use this community calls, for example, for following up on, hey, the events issue, have we already fixed that? What's the hold up? And those are good reminders for us in SharePoint engineering to make sure that we understand the importance of your issue, and we can then follow up on making those fixes happen. Now, some other topics on March. So March was closed last weekend. We grew actually from a community perspective quite a lot. So we had a 162,000 watch time minutes in YouTube. It is absolutely a pity that we can't sell ads for that. That would be a pretty nice number. There was 26,000 views in the YouTube as well. We had 37,000 unique visitors in GitHub. That is actually growing all the time as well, which is good. So people are finding the samples what we have in the GitHub in the SharePoint organization, because that's really the whole point. You as a community member, you can contribute those samples. We facilitate and contain and keep them in the repos, and then other people can actually find the samples from the GitHub as well. On the docs.microsoft.com, we had 831,000 views. That's growing quite rapidly as well. We'll probably break the 1 million views in the docs.microsoft.com SharePoint Dev Docs by end of May is currently my estimate. And on the PnP Classic reusable components usage, we broke 11,000 tenants within March, and we will break the 10 billion requests in April, which is pretty cool. So the usage of those components is growing all the time, and this includes PnP CSOM core, PnP PowerShell, and PnP JS. So open source community initiatives, which we kind of track their usage using then a HTTP header trackers, so we know how much people are using them. On the SharePoint framework or SharePoint add-ins, I do not have a permissions to share those numbers, but SharePoint framework usage is really growing rapidly. If you're interested on and considering should I actually move to the modern development topics, the answer is absolutely. SharePoint framework is more than double on SharePoint add-in model. So SharePoint framework is used really, or the adoption is growing all the time, which is great. Now, on other topics, just a quick reminders from last week from social media as well. We do have a new SharePoint developer portal now available, where we have latest videos and samples and news. Right now, there is actually, unfortunately, some sort of a glitch on the category. So if you go AKMS SPDev samples, you can find the samples, you can do search on the samples. Every now and then you actually find something which shouldn't be there. That should have been fixed already last night, but unfortunately that fix was delayed, so that should be fixed in the portal later today. Now, but you can find there's like 350 samples on a SharePoint development. If you go to the AKMS SPDev samples or AKMS SPDev and then samples from that link, you can easily find those samples to be available. Now, other topics, we released a new version of client-side object model, still absolutely 100% supported and will be in the future as well, because this is for managed code for .NET driven development, for example, in Azure. So there's a new version of the client-side object model, which was released in last Thursday. Yes, Thursday. Friday was a public holiday for me. And that didn't contain actually that much new, let's say, capabilities, few things here and there, but nothing too dramatical. The same actually happened for the PowerShell. So if you followed up on how do we release these in the monthly basis, the both CSOM and SharePoint Online PowerShell is getting released on the same day, and that is the last Friday of the month typically. There might be one day flipping here and there if needed. But because the SharePoint Online PowerShell is using CSOM, the client-side object model, SharePoint client-side object model, we are releasing them at the same time, so they are in sync and there's no problems for anybody who's using them. Now, the last thing, or almost the last thing before we get the column formatting and those things, we have a few more things and quick look on the roadmap. We can talk about the roadmap as well. But this is something new which went live earlier this week. This is actually pretty cool. So the AKMS SP PnP, so our classic community pages, are now in the docs.microsoft.com. You can actually now much more easily find community call information, social media resources, our open source projects, the contribution opportunities, and other resources. So we're listing all of the repositories and their usage and what they contain, for example, in these community pages. And what's really great about this one is that these are in the GitHub. So this is these pages are served from a GitHub, so anybody can submit modifications or suggestions, or let's say if we're missing something from these pages, you can absolutely do a pull request and suggest an edit on the pages as well. Good. One more thing, kind of from a news perspective, just we mentioned this quite a few times in these community calls, in the SharePoint development community calls, because there has been people who've been highly concerned on the impact of the retirement of the ACS, which is the Azure Access Control. So earlier this week, I published a blog post into dev.docs.com where we actually reference the updated guidance in the Azure AD side, which is then explicitly telling the impact for the ACS retirement. And the answer for anything related on SharePoint add-ins or provider hosted add-ins, SharePoint hosted add-ins, is that there's no impact. So even though the Azure Access Control will be retired, it doesn't actually include those areas of ACS which the SharePoint add-in model is actually using, which is slightly kind of let's say confusing, because if we're retiring ACS, how can one part of ACS still remain? But that is now the official statement from Azure AD guys and the Azure side, and this blog post is now referencing the latest status, and in the latest article there is an explicitly called out what does it mean for the SharePoint add-ins and other areas of add-ins as well. But that's really, really good. So this is finally clarified, and we have an official documentation which we can refer if somebody is asking around the ACS retirement and what is the impact for that one for SharePoint development. Cool. The final thing before I let Chris to do the live demo, quick look on the roadmap. So obviously we've all seen the slide so many times, probably in the past months after the Ignite, but we've done quite a lot of shipping after the Ignite. Right now, the next things which will go live, obviously it's Groupify API, and we promised to do that in this quarter. And we're now on the Q2 of 2018. That might be happening in SPC. We'll see where it's actually going to be announced. The next big announcements will happen in SharePoint Conference 2018 in Las Vegas on the 21st of May, if I remember correctly. But before the SPC, we should actually have at least preview version, and this should be actually available pretty soon. Additional capabilities available for the site design, so the native site design capability. So we will have, for example, support for deploying SharePoint Framework solutions to the sites, for using the site design capability, adding site columns and content types, or creating site columns and content types and associating them to the lists and sites. That's going to be available. Regional settings is going to be available, and a few other things. We'll absolutely make a big fuss out of these actions whenever they will be officially available for you to take advantage within the SharePoint Online. Good. Now, that's it for the roadmap. No questions in the window, which I probably missed something already. But let's actually move into the actual topic of the day, or the feature coverage of the day, which we promised to do. And we'll have Chris Kent, who's from MDI, do this one. And Chris is an MVP on SharePoint server, or are you an Office Dev MVP? Which one is it actually?
Office Dev.
Office Dev, okay. So because the SharePoint is kind of weird, we have SharePoint developers in both sides, in the Office Dev and then also in the Office Server MVP side. But anyway, so Chris is ready to go probably. Chris, you can absolutely start sharing your screen. And Chris is going to cover basically column formatting, the capability, and also the different resources what we have available. Chris has also built a super cool web port, SPFX web port, which we don't deep dive on the code of that one, but you can actually find where is it available, how to use that, and what's the advantages of doing that and using that within your work. But Chris, we can see your screen. You are still muted, just so you should unmute yourself, and I think we're good to go. I really like the picture, by the way. Always good. It always makes me wonder, is it,
right?
who has actually, is it, no, never mind. Okay, anyway, I'll let you do the presentation. If there's any questions which I missed during the intro on the Iron window, please repeat your questions. I will get back to them, but let's concentrate on Chris's presentation. So Chris, take it away.
All right. So again, my name is Chris Kent. You can reach me on Twitter. There's my blog, all that stuff. Feel free to follow up with questions about column formatting itself, but also about the column formatter, which we're going to talk about, or anything else I guess you want to talk about if you're lonely. All right. So what is O365 column formatting? So as you might have guessed, it is just an Office 365 thing. It's called Declarative Modern List View Customization. What does that really mean, right? What are we really doing with that? All right, so say you've got the modern list view, right? Here it is in all its glory. It's responsive, it's fancy, but it's boring, right? There's no more XSLT. For some of us, that's a huge celebration, right? We don't have to get in there, but then what do we replace that with, right? How do we make just simple customizations, turn something red, add a little icon, whatever we need to do there. There's no calculated column trickery anymore. They closed that loophole quite a bit ago, right? You can no longer do that HTML shoved into a number column. It's very sad, but what do we do, right? So what do we need? We don't need a modern list view. We need a dapper list view, right? All right, so that's where column formatting comes in. So column formatting allows you to, through declarative JSON, schema stuff right there, whatever those words are, right? You put it in here and you make it look all pretty on those things. So you can quickly take what's just a standard list view where it looks almost like Excel, and make it so it fits contextually for the user or for the site or the team they're in, and really make stuff make sense, know what they need to pay attention to, and all that stuff. Okay? All right. So, like I said, it is JSONs, right? So the JavaScript object notation. You can apply it directly to the list fields or site columns. So inside, when you edit your fields, right, if you go into the list settings, go to your field, you get this nice little box that shows up right above column validation. And you can paste it right there. Even easier, there's this format this column menu right on the list view. If you click that, all right, it's going to open up the exact same box, but in a little dialog, and you can preview it, you can save it. Very exciting. So let's take a look at what that looks like, okay? All right. Let's see. So you got your site here, right? So you've got your modern communication site, and on here, maybe you've got a list, right? And so here we got this exciting list, pretty standard kind of to-do list, right? Things we've got to take care of. But I'd like to make this, a little more obvious what's going on here. So I can grab some formats, which I've got over here in VS Code. right? So kind of the most simple one right here is I just want to change the color of the text to orange, right? Go back over here. And so for the title, I come in here and I go to column settings, format this column, and I can paste it. If I save that, everything's orange. It's very exciting, right? You know, we can do a little further than that. All right, so we come back here and we've got, you know, say I want to say, you know, every time this task are assigned to me, I really want to know about that. So we can use this nice @me operator. I can compare that, and I can easily highlight just the ones that matter to me. All right, so I can come over to this assign to, column settings, and I can format this column. Again, I just paste that JSON in there and save, and every time it's pink. And again, that is not just, you know, everyone will see that Chris Ken's pink, right? When Kermit the Frog shows up, his entries will be pink, and so on, okay? Now, let's say I want to do something a little further than that even, right? So, I mean, all of this is nice, but say I want to do something where it's a little more visual with the checkboxes here, right? I want to make the yes, no field as checkboxes. I want to use some fancy icons, right, from UI Fabric. We can easily do that with this icon name attribute. So I'm going to grab that, but the thing is with this one, I'm actually using this column both on things and other things, right? So I've got it in two spots here because that's a site column. Well, fortunately, I can go up to site columns, and I can edit that site column here. All right, it's a spooky sound right there. All right, here we go. So I just paste that here, and that same old column formatting box, I'm going to hit OK. And because I'm updating all list columns, it's going to go ahead and run out there and do all that. So I could have done that individually, but by doing this, now when I refresh this page, like some fancy checkboxes, right? And other things also has fancy checkboxes. So that's a pretty powerful way to manage some of those formats. All right. Now, what about something that's a little more visual, that looks a little better? All right, we could take that progress field and show it as a progress bar using kind of the out-of-the-box data bars. So I'm going to grab that. And again, I'm going to paste that into this progress field. Sucker in there. And there we go. So we've got a nice visualization, right? It matches the theme automatically, right? If this were one of those awful pink sites, right? It would be a nice pink right here. But what about, so I've got this other thing, right? So I want to notify someone, I want to nag them, right? Like, you need to really install these horse lasers, right? So I've got a flow. It's associated with the list, supposedly. All right. Refresh that page. But the idea here is generally, right, you grab an item, select it, and your flow should show up here. There it is. So send an email about the selected item. Right, that's not super obvious to a lot of people, right, unless you've explicitly told them how to go do that. You know, how do I do that, right? So one of the nice things you could do is you can do something that's called a row action. So I come in here, I can just create a dummy column, right? We'll call it action. And I'll go grab another format over here. So I've got this other format called horse flow. And here all I've done is I've got a custom row action where I've got these action parameters, which is really just that flow ID, which I've just copied out of the URL of the details page of that flow. And then I've done some other stuff to make it look exciting. I've got an icon and some text content, right? So if I grab that, though, even though I don't have anything in this field, I come in here and I can format this column, paste that, save, close that. Now I have an action button. So now I don't have to select and then go up to the menu and select it. I can just directly say nay, right? And it's going to open up that run flow dialog for me right over here. And the kind of the standard stuff happens here. So I run the flow, and it's going to go up and it's going to notify whoever that needs to notify. So again, you can see pretty quick, it's really easy to apply a lot of really fancy formatting, right? And get kind of crazy with it. Without having to ever deploy anything, I didn't have to reach out to any admins, right? I didn't have to put anything in the app catalog or the site catalog. I don't have to maintain that code. When SharePoint framework updates, I don't have to run any kind of node updates or any of that kind of stuff, right? It's all just here, and it's all stored directly with the fields, which is really, really powerful. So let's take a look at what that actually means. All right, so let's flip back to the slides here. All right. So again, the idea is this is totally not custom code, right? Take that with a big, big grain of salt, right? Because we've got anything that's got syntax and operations, right? I don't know what you call that. I call that code, right? But the idea here is you get a pretty good set of elements you can apply, put out on the page. You can do your content directly with text content. You've got a series of attributes. Again, these are fairly limited, but you can do a lot with them, especially if you get creative. We'll show you a little more of that in a second. All right, so there are 124 different style properties, which sounds like a whole lot, but of course we are counting like border and then border left and then border right and so on. But overall, it has very good coverage. There's a few things it doesn't have. But again, you can find all that in the documentation that's linked down here. And in fact, let me grab that link. Yeah, I'll paste that in here. This is for the documentation on all that. Okay. And then within that, you can nest as many children. So that's the idea of more elements as you need to. So you can get really complex stuff, or you can say pretty simple. Just really depends on your needs. And then there's a series of operators and operands, right, which is going to cover basic math, all your comparison stuff. There's some conversion for dates to strings and so on, some logical stuff like your ands and your ors. And there's a nice conditional operator, which is the one you're going to use all the time, so the question mark operator. But again, there are some limits here as well, right? So there's not the idea of like some of the string operations you might expect, right, where you can do a left or a right or a substring or any of that kind of stuff. But overall, you get pretty far with a lot of this. Okay. All right, so supported column types. They're on the left. The ones on the right are not yet supported. I will tell you, you can work around the file name and document libraries by building it yourself. I've got an example of that on the issues list. If you're interested in that, you can just reach out if that's something you're really wanting to do. But for the most part, this is pretty good coverage. I will say there's a couple of issues with a few of these fields, right? So hyperlink, one of the issues there is you can only get the URL. You cannot get that description property as of yet, but there is an issue submitted on that. Basically anything with a dot property outside of people and lookups is just not accessible to you. Okay? All right, but again, huge coverage here. You can do a lot with it. And again, you can reference not just your field, you can reference other fields within that same row, which I'll show you in a minute. So how do you do all that? Right, so that's where this kind of special text or magic strings or whatever you want to call it come in. The first one is this @current field. Whenever you type that, it's going to take the actual value, whether that's text or number or choice or any of those kinds of things, and just put it right in there, however you want to use it, right? So the obvious example is with the text. Right, but the type is respected. So if it's a number and you want to do addition or you want to do division or any of those other kind of math operators, you totally can. One thing to note is that there are several operations for dates to get that string looking correctly. You'll want to wrap those in that. Okay? All right. Now, slightly different with the person fields. So when you got a person field, you can't use current field directly, but you can access all of these different properties, which is really awesome in a lot of ways, right? So you can grab the title, which is really their name, right? And that email address, you can compare that against that me operator, or even their picture if you want to use it in an image element as the source attribute. So again, you can do a lot with that. The same is going to be true for lookup fields, where you're going to have a lookup value or a lookup ID. Generally, you're only going to want the lookup value, but I guess if you are really interested in that lookup ID, go for it, right? All right, so other fields. How do you reference something outside of the individual field you're in, right? So all you're working with is the individual field of a column on a row-by-row basis, right? So you don't have access to other rows, but you do have access to other values within that same row. And the way you do that is you specify the internal name of the field inside two brackets with a dollar sign in the front. All right, so this is how I'd access the title in another field. And the same thing is going to be true for any of those person fields or the lookup fields. You're just going to do that same kind of dot notation right inside there. So I can do author.email or whatever my lookup is, .lookup value. Okay? All right. So then we got this powerful little thing called @me. So this is one of our context values, and @now, which is the other context value. And so what will happen with @me is every time you use that, it resolves to your current user's email address. So that's how we did that current user, kind of highlighting before. So if we took a look at that, you can see we're doing, this is that conditional operator, this is basically an if, and if it's true, right, choose the first thing, and if it's false, choose the second thing, right? So in this case, if me is equal to the current fields.email, all right, I'm going to make it pink. Otherwise, just keep the same color as it was before. All right, so you can quickly see we can use that @me to do some pretty dynamic stuff. All right. @now works very similar. It resolves to the date and time at the time of a render. So that's important, right? So don't expect that as the time changes and someone keeps this up on their desktop all day, that it's going to ever update, right? So it is the date and time at render. But again, you can do a lot of cool stuff with that, with due dates, comparing against progress, all that stuff. So you can get pretty fancy in the kind of things you're showing and how you want to get in there and do that. Okay? All right. Which, again, calculator fields have never been able to do that, right? So this is a huge advantage over that. All right. So this gets us into why would you use column formatting versus like a field customizer, right? We have this whole idea of SharePoint Framework extensions. They are awesome, right? One of them is a field customizer, and you can do amazing stuff with that, right? And you can do pretty much everything I've just shown you with a field customizer. So why on earth would you do column formatting, right? So here we go. So the idea is that you can do both conditional formatting. Hey, if you want to do that, you can do it in either one, right? One of the limitations of column formatting is it's static links. So there's no scripts, right? If you want to create a little light box, right? You click an image, does a little light box. That's out. That's a field customizer, right? You can do any kind of link, including script links. Visualizations. You can get really, really creative with column formatting, but it is still limited, right? It's a limited subset of elements, a limited subset of attributes. But if field customizer, do whatever you want, right? Okay. Page context. All you get is those @now and @me. Obviously, with field customizer, you're going to get that full context, right? You're not going to be able to get, anything about the list or the page. So if you're trying to build some pretty dynamic URLs, that's not going to happen in column formatting. You want to include a JavaScript library. You want to include something like Font Awesome, directly include those fonts or special style sheets, or do your own custom CSS classes. Nope, nope, and nope, right? In terms of column formatting, field customizer, do whatever you want, right? Obviously within reason. And interactivity, right? You've got a link and that's it. You don't even get hover styles or hover properties here, okay? But here's the key, right? So I really like column format. I don't know if you guys have picked up on that. The first thing is developer part. I'm going to say no with quotes because hopefully we give you something that makes that a little bit more true. But really the key is the solution deployment. The idea of having to have an admin deploy your solution, you have to maintain that the technical debt of a solution, you better make it worth it, right? And applying that to pages and doing all that stuff, there's a whole lot more to it. So my recommendation is use column formatting whenever possible, which honestly it's going to cover 90% of your visualization needs. It's when you want to go fancier, you want to really trigger stuff, you want to build a piece of an application on it, that's when you're going to go field customizer. And it's very important to know its limits. Those are kind of the designed limits. There are a few other limits right now, but a lot of strengths too, right? So some of the strengths, I mentioned is the no package set, there's no flashing, it's little to no effort. You don't have to have extreme permissions on this stuff to do any of that. It's really easy to include a UI fabric icon in there.
And Chris, sorry for putting you off the flow.
Yeah.
One thing to mention in here also, we just thought about this is an awesome list of things why the column formatting, what does it provide and why field customizer. Now, one additional thing is that the column formatting can be modified by the end user, field customer, and basically disable. So somebody can go and remove the column formatting from a field accidentally or intentionally, but with field customizer they can't. So because field customizer is a API-based modification.
I think it's a great point. And so this is definitely designed more for your site owners.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, like end users, they wouldn't be able to do that because they wouldn't have access to edit the field, right? If they're just read access.
Yep.
But yeah, if you're trying to really send something out there, and this is something we always want, right, on a list, this is not the way to go. Totally agree. Okay. All right, we'll continue with this. So then some of the other stuff is, I'd say that's actually easier to approach than JS Link ever was. Now, you say it's easier, but it's also, again, more limited, which, again, is both good and bad, depending on what you want to hand to end users. right? Some of the existing limitations outside of this kind of list that are kind of planned, just some issues right now, are that you can't use CSS properties with parentheses. So if you want to do a linear gradient, you want to do a background image with a URL, any RGBA colors, that kind of stuff, that's out. SVG is pretty limited right now. Really, you just get path, right? So you can't do stroke or viewbox or circle or that kind of stuff. Again, you can work around that like crazy and do a lot of cool stuff, but that's one of those frustrations. There is a user voice out there for that one. Go check it out. I don't have the link. And this is the biggest limitation by far right now, is that it's not supported in the list web part. So if you, it's really just that list view. So you put that list web part on there, none of these things are showing up. I assume that's coming. Anyone want to comment? Here's the date? Nope. Okay. All right. And then again, some limited operations. I've just mentioned some of the missing field type things, like with the hyperlink description. And one of the other frustrating things that, again, you can work around pretty easily is the idea of there's individual property conditions only. So what I mean by that is, so setting a color is pretty straightforward, right, based on a condition. Say you want to set a color and you want to make it bold. You're going to have to repeat that condition each time. And you can say it'll quickly spiral out, right? You want to apply an icon as well, then you got to repeat that condition, and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, it's a little frustrating, but again, really powerful because you could just do it right there. Okay? All right, so a couple of tips with that is, I mentioned this idea of this conditional operator, that question mark, right? If we take a look at that again, right, you can easily string this together to make basically a switch statement. So by doing the question mark here, right, and I've got my two values here, right here I'm saying, like, when it's true, do deep pink, but if I want to compare against something else, all I do is I repeat this operator and operands again, right here, and I just keep going on and on down. We'll see another example of that here in a little bit. I'll make that a little more obvious, but you're going to see that pattern repeated over and over. All right, there's another option called debug mode. I recommend you leave it off unless you're actually having an issue, because it can cause you problems, especially if you've got like blank values, right? Where it wasn't a required field, someone didn't fill it out. It'll actually fill that up with an error message, and it's very confusing. So just leave the debug mode out altogether, but when you want to turn it on, it's just debug mode and the value is true. All right. Colors, as you can see, colors can be referenced both by their hex values, but also by the HTML standard names, and those are not case sensitive. Icons, however, are case sensitive, so just watch that. So just go to the UI Fabric site, copy it exactly what it's supposed to be, and or use a tool I'll show you in a minute. Right? Okay. All right. So that was very exciting stuff. And that's great, right? I mean, that's really powerful stuff, but what is this supposed to be targeted at, right? So we've got field customizers for developers. And if this is really for more that owner, that kind of power user person, what's going on with it, right? So say I'm someone, maybe my name is Todd, right? So I'm Todd, and I get this idea, right, that I've got a due date column on my task list. And, you know, it would be awesome, and everyone would love me if I made it when the due date is passed, it's red. Like, right? I will be a hero. Everyone's going to celebrate me. You know, I'll probably get promoted to CIO. You know, whatever, right? And that's just like, I could probably do that. I used to be able to do it before. So it does a little bit of pinging, right? And when he finds out, clicking around the interface, he finds finally that format column, right? He clicks on this blue link here. It takes him to that exciting document. Right, he opens that up. It says 18 minutes to read. Sure, right? 18 minutes to read, but not to understand. So he spends a lot of time. He's really looking in there. He's getting in there. This is pretty much the only document that exists. And officially, he's supposed to go to Visual Studio Code, right? So again, if he is different than 99% of all users, and he's actually installed an IDE, and he's gone that far, right? Somehow we have not lost him yet. All right, so he writes it in there. And then what he does is he has to copy it. He has to paste it up here. And then he hits preview. It's not quite right, so he goes back and he edits it over Visual Studio Code, and he copies it and pastes it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And now Todd is sad. Right? This turned out to be way more work, way harder. And even if he somehow magically gets it working, you can bet he's not going to try that again for anything more complicated than just setting a color. Right? So what's he supposed to do? How can we help Todd? Right? So there's this awesome repository out there, right? So spdev column formatting samples. I'll paste the link over here. So it has 25 plus different samples in there, all just in JSON formats. They're easy to update. There's instructions for each one of them, along with screenshots, along with tips on how you might want to customize that further. And that is a great spot to go to start learning some of this stuff. And one of the nice things is you don't need to, unlike some of our other sample repos, right, where you've got to clone it and bring it down and understand all that, you can go directly into GitHub, open up the JSON, and just copy and paste that right in there and start using it. Okay, so that's one really great resource. I also highly encourage you to contribute back to this. So it's really easy. Again, this is probably the lowest entry point. If you want to contribute a sample, this is the easiest one to do. So please do. Again, there's a bunch in there for every different column type that's supported, but there's a lot more room for growth. Okay. All right, what about this? This thing I've presented before, and let's talk a little bit about what's new and what you can do with it. So this column formatter is a web part. Again, you can get this in the SPDev solution, so it's fully open source. We're not going to talk about the code today, but if you're interested in the code, you can obviously go poking around in it. You can use whatever you want. You reach out with questions, all that kind of stuff. It is a React-based web part using Redux and all that stuff. And if you're really interested in what's new since the last time I presented it, here's that as well. Okay, so let's take a look at this thing. Maybe. Here we go. So we go back, and we want to do this in an easier way, right? All right. Is there somebody create a link for? Yes, there is. In fact, so here. Oh, look at that. I was doing a new one already. Here. And I'll show you that in just a minute, AC. All right. So I have this idea here. I've got a column formatter. So when you first open this web part, excuse the size here. I've got it zoomed quite a bit so we can see it. But you have a lot of options. So I put this in a full width column here, which gives me a little more space. But the idea is when I get in here, I hit new, and I pick my column type. And for this case, I'm just going to do text, right? And I'm going to start from scratch, right, which is a little bit of the hard mode, but I'm going to go in here. And the idea is I get this screen here, where I've got my preview, what's going on here. I've got some data, and here is my JSON that I'm actually writing, right? Now, the nice thing is I can actually write this stuff directly here. You'll see there's some IntelliSense going on, so I can quickly write this color. So if I really wanted to write that orange-red, thing we saw before, again, pretty straightforward. You can see it preview in real time over here. If you need to change these values to match something that makes sense, right? Type in Tony, I don't know, the tiger. That sounds great, right? You can do whatever you want. You can also add additional rows. If you need to reference those other columns, right, you can come over here and you can grab this, and you can add all sorts of different things here. So you can add any of those column types, right? So if you want to add a date, time, and you get a nice little picker here to pick all that stuff to get those details in there, or a person where you want to set their email address, all that stuff. So the idea here is you should be able to quickly replicate the kind of data you're working with. All right. For now, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. We've got the different views here, very exciting. And that's really powerful, and that's great, but what's even more powerful is a series of templates and wizards, right? So if we come in here and I hit new, I have this idea that I can come in here and let's pick a number, and this is a template here, right? So I've got a trending. So what a template does is it gives you a preset of data, right? And it gives you the code, and that way you can go ahead and start editing that as needed, right? So a template's really a big leg up. It's a nice starting point. Right? You can see we're referencing those other columns here. You can start to edit this and do whatever you need. A wizard, on the other hand, is a little more elaborate. So with a wizard, we can come in here. A wizard makes it so you don't even need to see code at all. You totally can if you want to, right? So you can come in here, you can turn that on, you can take a look at it. But the idea with a wizard is you can easily pick just your values, right? So I could change size pretty dynamically. I could change my colors, right? If I want to change that to primary or purple or whatever it is I want here. But you get the idea here that that's pretty straightforward. And say I really like this now, and I've got my column over here, right? So this data bar, it's okay. It's not exciting or it's not sexy enough for I don't know, your CIO, that doesn't pop, right? So I've got this. I have a number of save options, right? Number one, I can download it. So this is a great way to write a sample. This is what I do when I write a sample. I literally hit the download button. It's going to create a JSON file and just download right to your downloads folder. You can copy it to your clipboard if you just want to copy it and place that everywhere directly in those things. You're not quite comfortable with saving it here. You want to paste it. You can do that. You can also save it to a local library. That's just going to save your JSON file to a library. You can apply it to a site column. So when you click that, you're going to be able to pick those columns, right? So if I wanted to pick that horse stuff, you can see how I've got my complete yes or no. I can even push it down to change list. Let's see. And then you can also hit this apply to local list field, right? So this is where I can pick that things list. And now I can pick my progress. I can hit save, all right? And if we go back to that, if I hit refresh on this, there it is. Of course, I picked extremely low values. And if we look at that, what's going on there is I didn't set them up. Aha! Sorry about the screen. I got scared. Okay. What happens is I can just set a special range for that. I can hit save again. In other words, you can specify your own custom range. It doesn't have to be 0 to 100. It can be, 10 to 50, right? So if you're just shooting for certain budget amounts, you can do whatever you need there, and it's just going to apply that for you. So again, I did not have to write code. We were looking at the code, but there is no reason for you to have to do that. In fact, I can't even edit this code to screw myself up unless I hit this customize and turn off the wizard. Okay. Now, back to AC's question. All right, is there a wizard to directly bug Vesta? Yes, absolutely. We'll hate to leave that out, right? So we've got this mail to wizard here, and in fact, that's how it starts. You guys can see that. So it'll generate that right for you, so you can go right for it. You're welcome. I heard you scale, so that should be fine. The other thing you could do here, so if you're really editing that stuff, right, you've created one, maybe someone else did, right, and they're like, it's great that I can see who this is assigned to, but pink, really? Like, why? Right, why would you do that to me? You can go and you can open that directly from that local list. You can also upload or drag and drop these things right on here, but I'm just going to load it from the local list. And again, all I do is I choose my list, and I don't remember what that call it, assigned to, right? And you can see it's just going to load it right up here. Instead of deep pink, again, I can change that to orange, right? We'll just do that, and then we'll hit save. And if we go back, cross our fingers, and we hope, and it's orange. So you get the idea here is it's pretty straightforward. There's a ton of these out there in terms of wizards and templates. It's pretty integrated with that repo. So if something really great in that repo, we try and move it in here is either just a template, hopefully a wizard, so you can do some of that stuff. It's also really easy to set up and get installed. So you don't even need to build it. You can just go directly to this link right here. And what that'll do is it'll tell you how to set this up. It'll provide you the asset package or the SharePoint framework package directly. Just grab that in your app catalog or site catalog with all the instructions, and you're good to go. And then there's also full documentation on all of these wizards and everything you need to know at this link. Also, by the way, that is totally not my chair. I don't know what's going on with that creepy noise. So it's exciting though. All right, so that's the bulk of it. Please reach out. So this is available in French. It's available in German. It's available in English, obviously. You can get kind of crazy. Again, I had to zoom out to show it to you here. But you can see that there are a bunch of properties here where you can make this thing as full screen as you need to. And in fact, if you edit that, you can see there's additional properties as well. So we'll come over here. Let me go ahead and get it inside there. Yeah, that's great. You can turn on or off line numbers, your indent guides. You can turn on a mini map, which on a tiny one like this doesn't make a lot of sense, but it allows you to quickly zoom or scroll through that. You've also got a bunch of theming options. You can change that height as needed. Let me know if there's something that's missing that you're looking for, or if you want to just build it yourself. Again, contributions are completely welcome. Okay, I think that's about all I got. Any questions or anything?
I think we need to start up some sort of a saving thing for getting you a new chair, because
it's not my chair.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure it was Patrick. I'm just gonna blame.
Yeah, it's Patrick. It's always Patrick, so that's cool. So I have to say that this web part, obviously the whole column formatting is absolutely great capability. And like noted on the IAM window, I'm just going to recycle certain things. So right now the list view web part does not support column formatting. It will support that in the future. It is absolutely in our pipeline to make it work. Right now the column formatting only works within the list. So in future, obviously it will be working in the list web part as well. The same actually related on field customizers and list web part or the editing pane. Please use the user voice entry which we listed on the IAM window, or there's the user voice entry, so we can get additional votes on that one. The votes always impact on our SharePoint engineering prioritization. So more votes means that people want to have certain things, and that impacts. Now, the other stuff here, the Chris's web part is absolutely brilliant. So it clearly helps you to do the configurations. And like I said, Chris was it a week ago when you submitted like 10 different new contributions to the column formatting repo, which is like, and another one, and another one, and another one, which basically was you were using your own web part, right? For designing that. Yeah. Cool. And we'll keep on having additional capabilities on the column formatting as well. Now, we are potentially looking into having a native UI for column formatting thing. On the other hand, now that Chris has this, the question is how do we, what is the right option to go forward into engineering, and we'll figure it out. But absolutely a great demo and absolutely great presentation. I'm going to flip back on the slides. Maybe one more thing to mention while we're flipping on the slides and the Q&A section. You can absolutely set the column formatting programmatically as well. So if you want to provision a site collection with the lists or let's say site collection fields or site fields and set the column formatting into that one, you can absolutely do that using API. So there is a CSOM and a REST API properties for setting the column formatting definition for the field itself. So absolutely possible. And then there was a discussion, plenty of discussion around the content type hub. Well, let's not actually touch that topic right now. And this call will have further news on that one, obviously latest on SharePoint conference. Potentially, I can't disclose all of the stuff, but I know for sure. Maybe one thing to mention here, AC actually noted this one already. So AC and Rencor, so Voitanos and Rencor, to be precise. Voitanos is a company where AC actually works, or well, how do I want to put that, are actually running the state of SharePoint development survey. So I'm going to put the IAM window note on that there as well. Please go and fill this up because that actually helps us in the SharePoint engineering as well, because then we get a slightly more detailed insights on what are you building, which environments you're using, where are you using, what is important, and all of that. And sure, this is not a Microsoft-driven survey, but it is a community-driven survey, but we can use the information in the survey as well as part of our own internal planning. Yes, AC works for Voitanos, but he also owns that. So, but yeah. Any other questions? We have 5 minutes. This is like the first time ever when we are on time within this year, at least. You can feel free to extract and custom build. Yep. There is a on the Site Design Studio. So Yannick will do a live demo on the monthly community call, which is actually on next Tuesday. And I know we have quite a lot of these community calls, but Yannick will do a live demo on the Site Design Designer on the web part on next Tuesday, and we get that one recorded in the video as well. Yes, thanks for the link, Chris. Any other questions? More and more. We'll definitely not have more SharePoint Dev community calls more than this. But I think that the most and something what we actually chatted in the PnP team as well. It's brilliant to see how active the IAM window is, that people are answering between each other and helping each other, because that really shows how we are helping the community as well, and how active the GitHub is and issue lists are and the community are. So. Good. Any other questions or good jokes? Chris, you got any good jokes?
Nope.
No, never. Okay, so no burning questions at this point. We will have the next monthly community call actually next Tuesday. That is the monthly community call, which is the April monthly community call for SharePoint. We'll talk about the user voice. We'll talk about what has happened within the last month, what was released within the last month, and all of that stuff. The next SharePoint General, SharePoint Dev special interest group call is on April 19th, and we'll probably have again one specific topic or a design, and we kind of a deep dive on that topic on that call as well, or 2 topics, we'll see. The next SharePoint Framework special interest group is on week from now, Thursday on 12th of April, and there we actually deep dive again on the SharePoint framework. In this call, we intentionally, I asked Chris Kent not to deep dive on the web part implementation, but we can actually deep dive on the implementation topics of that web part at some of the SPFX calls if there's a demand for that. There's nothing burning on the Iron window. On the Power Apps forms, I'm unfortunately a wrong person to answer that, but it's good to see that other people are helping on that one. But I think that's it. We will close 2 minutes early today, which is great. The first time probably since 4 months. Sharing is caring. Please contribute back on the community if you can. If you have availability, that's more than a welcome. This is how the community works. We are highly dependent on what you contribute for the others in the SharePoint Dev community. And thank you for all of the contributions for MVPs and community members, what you've done in the past as well. And thank you, Chris, for a great demo today. But thank you, everybody. And the video will be recorded, and the video will be available in the YouTube channel within 24 hours. Thank you, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.